Welcome. My name is Melissa Kane, and I'm the Vice President of BigTentUSA. And while the world and our government right now are very chaotic, BigTentUSA remains committed to defending our democratic values, our Constitution, and the rule of law. Our goal is to empower with facts, guidance, and calls to action so that we can all become stronger, more effective advocates. We urge you to use the knowledge you gain from tonight's conversation with Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Barbara McQuade to fight back. Their discussion of strategies used to manipulate public perception, erode trust in democracy, and consolidate power are going to offer us really helpful insights into how we can respond effectively and resist. But before we get started with these two brilliant women and our equally brilliant moderator, Kimberly Atkins Stohr, I want to highlight a few things that you can be doing right now to have an impact. First is to work to stop the SAVE Act. This is an act that's been raised in Congress, and if it's passed, it could keep millions of people from being able to vote. So we are putting links in the chat to initiatives that are working right now to keep this from happening. Please take a look and see where you can join and what you can do. You can join one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of protest rallies that are occurring as part of the Hands-Off Day of Action and People's Veto Day all around the country on Saturday, April 5th. We're going to post those links as well. And I hope you'll be able to sign up. I think it would be really good to be together and let the world know that a lot of Americans are not okay with what is going on. And now, it is truly an honor for me to introduce you to the three extraordinary women we'll be hearing from tonight. Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a professor of history and Italian studies at New York University. She specializes in the study of fascism, authoritarianism, and propaganda. She has authored several books, including the New York Times bestseller, Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present, which examines how illiberal leaders use propaganda, corruption, violence, and machismo to maintain power. In addition to her academic work, Ruth publishes Lucid, a Substack newsletter focused on threats to democracy, and she serves as an advisor to Protect Democracy. Barbara McQuade is a professor at the University of Michigan Law School, her alma mater, where she teaches courses in criminal law, criminal procedure, hi there, Barb, national security, and data privacy. She's also a legal analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, and a co-host of the Politicon legal news podcast, Sisters-in-Law, which is awesome if you haven't ever listened to it. From 2010 to 2017, McQuade served as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. She was appointed by President Barack Obama and was the first woman to serve in that position. Earlier in her career, she worked as a sports writer and copy editor, a judicial law clerk, an associate in private practice, and an assistant U.S. attorney. She's the author of Attack from Within: How Disinformation is Sabotaging America. Our moderator for this evening's amazing discussion between these internationally recognized experts in analyzing and addressing challenges to democratic institutions and the rule of law is Kimberly Atkins Stohr. Hi, Kimberly. Kimberly is a senior opinion writer and columnist at the Boston Globe. She's also an MSNBC contributor, a frequent panelist on NBC's Meet the Press, and she is co-host, along with Barb, of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. Previously, Kim was the inaugural columnist for The Emancipator, a nonprofit digital magazine collaboration between the Boston Globe and Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research. Kimberly, Ruth, Barb, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Welcome to Big Tent.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa. And I won't delay anymore in getting to the conversation that everybody wants to hear tonight, which is the discussion about the state of our democracy amid the disinformation and just the disorder that is happening right here in Washington, D.C. and beyond. And as I was thinking about this discussion, Ruth, tonight, and just sort of talking about our democratic institutions, which seem to be eroding right in front of our eyes, I thought about what I read in your Substack, Lucid, which everyone should subscribe to, by the way, about how autocrats govern. And it was really insightful because the points that you made about what the hallmarks of autocratic governance just kept hitting, just with what we are seeing play out in front of us. So just to kick it off, can you talk a little bit about the hallmarks of autocratic rule and how you're seeing that play out here in America?
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. I'm so thrilled to be here with you and Barb. Boy, a lot going on. Authoritarianism at its most basic is when the executive branch kind of, you know, has an overreach of power and domesticates or neutralizes, takes away independence from the other branches, especially judiciary. And basically, instead of government serving the people, government is remade as an instrument to serve the leader and his cronies. That's really important. And another part of authoritarianism, which we're seeing unfold too, is it's about taking away the rights of the many and giving unheard of liberties to the very few. And these are liberties to plunder. So plunder the economy, plunder the environment, plunder the workforce by, attacking unions and plundering the vulnerable, which could be sex trafficking, domestic abuse, getting away with it. Impunity is super important. And so you have these bad actors and really rich people, and whether they're corporate actors or individual who have privileges and feel protected in ways they didn't before. And so that's a definition about the processes of authoritarianism that isn't it doesn't usually, I'm mentioning it because it doesn't usually come up if we only talk about the executive and institutions. And last thing I'll say is that we're seeing play out when I wrote my book Strongmen, it goes back 100 years. It's like the same groups get attacked over and over again because autocrats have to take away freedom of the press. They're corrupt. So you have LGBTQ people, nomadic peoples in many parts of the world, journalists, the political opposition, of course, religious and ethnic minorities, because you have these kind of racist purity crusades. So there are these patterns in history, and unfortunately now in America, we're seeing pretty much all of them unfold. And then last thing I'll say is we also have some new things happening, which we can get into later, that America is innovating the authoritarian playbook because, like, my book only has one guy on the cover, the strong man. We have two guys. We have unelected whatever it is, Musk. And so this is something that is new. This is never this, I'm calling it power sharing. I haven't actually seen this before because he's not an oligarch who's in the private sector. He's become part of the government. So this is something we need to think about also for resistance, because traditional resistance where you try and subtract support for the single strongman, now we got two to worry about.
Hmm. That's really interesting. And as also as I watch this play out, I've been reading a lot and I've been rereading Barb's book on
Yeah.
disinformation because you can't have this play out without uh, being told, the American people being told that what they're seeing isn't actually what they're seeing. And the current administration has become very good at that, right down to the point about Elon Musk, who, again, I think I say this every episode of Sisters-in-Law. He's not elected. He was not confirmed by anybody. He just walked in and took over parts of the government, which is both illegal and unconstitutional, but they just make it seem like it's normal and feed disinformation to allow that to happen so that it's harder for Americans to reject it. Barb, can you talk a little bit about how disinformation has become a core value in the current administration?
Absolutely, Kim. And disinformation has been the secret sauce for the past 10 years in paving the way for the Trump administration. So, one of the big strategies is divide and conquer, create two teams. There's the good guys and the bad guys, heroes and villains. This is a reflection of what Donald Trump did in reality television. Give people simple storylines that are easy to follow. And you want to be on the side of the good guys and not on the side of the bad guys. And so that's so much of what we see. You know, when Donald Trump complains about a judge, it isn't, I dislike his decision, or I think he was wrong, or he's a bad judge. It's he's a radical leftist judge, right? Because that's the other side. They have been demonized and painted as people who hate America. So if you love America, you should be on my team. And if you hate America, you're on that other team. And I think one of the things that we've seen lately in this divide and conquer strategy too has been immigration and trying to portray immigrants, as Ruth just said, as the scapegoats of society. The reason the economy is poor, the reason you don't have as good a job as your parents did is because of all of these immigrants. Crime, you know, they'll mention Laken Riley and other victims, tragic though they may be, and use it as a lightning rod to get people riled up about immigration. You know, when those men were deported from the United States to El Salvador, to that prison, the first thing that went up was that glitzy Hollywood style film, right? Of people being subjected, put their head down, shave their heads in their underwear, chained together on their knees. That is to feed this idea that they are somehow less than human, to demonize them. In Nazi Germany, you know, the same kind of rhetoric against Jewish people being forced to scrub streets in the town square, and people would jeer at them because they had been indoctrinated with the idea that these people are less than human. Now, maybe these people don't belong in the United States. Maybe they are members of a transnational gang, and maybe they should be deported. But the glee and the dehumanization and the glitzy Hollywood video with the dramatic music is all about, it's propaganda. It's getting people excited about cheering that our side is winning and their side is losing. And the last thing I'll mention now about disinformation is one thing I want everybody to listen for. And this is happening a lot when it comes to legal decisions. In the law, it is very important to separate substance versus process. Just because there is a laudable goal or a goal consistent with Donald Trump's political campaign does not mean he gets to do it by any means necessary without following the law. And so one of the pieces of disinformation we've been hearing a lot lately after Judge Boasberg, who was upheld today, found that the Alien Enemies Act may not apply to this deportation of these men, and that they have a due process right to a hearing before they're deported to find out if they are indeed non-citizens and are indeed a member of this transnational gang, entered a temporary restraining order. What Attorney General Pam Bondi said about that is, this judge is siding with the terrorists. She is putting substance over process and conflating the two. And I think for a lot of people who are non-lawyers and aren't paying a close attention to that, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, what's this guy's deal anyway? Why is he siding with the terrorists? He's not siding with the terrorists. He is siding with the law. Ultimately, we don't know which way he will come out. He's not on anybody's side. He is neutral, independent, objective. And so he is looking at the law. Does this law apply, which by its own terms is supposed to apply only during wartime? Seems probably not. And are these men entitled to due process under the Fifth Amendment of the United States? Of course they are. So he's not siding with the terrorists, he's siding with the law. But that is a tactic we are hearing again and again from the Trump administration, substance versus process. So keep an eye on the process, because that's what the law cares about.
You know what I'm thinking about in this conversation, getting back to reading, which is Animal Farm, right? You know, first it was 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good. Then by the end, it became 4 legs good, 2 legs better, right? And they sort of, the shift in the focus, because they belonged in this new club now, that they wanted to get the closer to the power that they got, the more they fell in line with the messaging. And I think a lot of people are surprised that there hasn't been as much voter remorse or supporters remorse over what's going on than was expected. And I want to talk a little bit about that, Ruth, because we can't talk about disinformation and the role of the press and how we stay informed without the simple fact that logic and politics don't necessarily go together. Politics is about a gut feeling. It's about a belonging in a membership. And right now, there is a conservative MAGA movement that is ascendant that people like being a part of. Yeah, they may not like that their mom may be kicked off of Social Security or may not get her check this week because it's just being run so poorly. But they want to still belong to this ideal that they believe that they are a part of. How does this happen?
Well, from that point of view, because Trump has a truly robust leader cult, and it's quite amazing that he's been able to, first of all, construct a leader cult like that working in a full democracy, and also keep it all the years he was out of power, where he should have been just a has-been, right? Go away and have he wouldn't have a library, but do your normal post-presidential things. So having Musk there, who I mean, yes, he has his tech bro fans, but he's quite unlikable to many. Is handy for Trump because he can keep his pure leader thing, I am MAGA, Great America, going, and Musk is there, to kind of take the blame in a way. Not that he's going to openly do it, but that's the one advantage of having two. But the way propaganda works, the reason it's going to take, I believe there will be a reckoning. And I've written this I wrote this the first week of when I saw what was going on. There's going to be a reckoning because people will start to see, I think that what's going on, I think sabotage is a good word. I've been trying to work with narrative frames to describe this. They took the most robust economy in the world and they're wrecking public health. They're doing things that are going to spread disease, disrupt the system, paralyze government, paralyze social assistance services. And there will be a reckoning because it will trickle down to people's everyday lives. And so often people ask me, well, when did people start to rebel against Hitler and Mussolini, for example? And those are very different circumstances. They had a one-party state with a totally closed media for years, but it was when they started getting bombed by the Allies. Like when the wreckage of what was going on became clear. And so we're going to see that going on. But in the meantime, the reason it's been so challenging is that Donald Trump's one of the most skilled propagandists in history. He truly is. Like, he got 100 million or more people to believe he won the election in 2020, working in a completely free media environment. That's very unusual. And what he's been able to do is, propaganda is not just about getting people to believe this or that lie, although the 2020 election was the, quote, big lie. It's really about changing the way people see the world. And the meta theme that he and when I say Trump, I'm also including Fox News and all the GOP people. It's like an assemblage.
Right.
He has been very effective at trying to get Americans to believe that democracy is failing and that something else is needed. And so he's done this work, he and his associates, of delegitimizing and discrediting. He used his time out of office to completely delegitimize the Biden administration, the idea of elections, all the democratic institutions, even things that were, that conservatives loved. They were the deep state now, like the FBI. And so they were very, very successful in taking public trust away from all of the institutions that make up democracy. And then at the same time, he had an equally relentless work of praising dictators, whether it's Putin or Xi or even the leader of North Korea. Like, who likes him? No one. But he likes him. Love letters. So he tried to shift the perceptions that Americans have of democracy and strongman rule, and he's been able to benefit from that up to the present.
Yeah, so this is part of that two legs better, Barb.
Yeah,
He's attacking courts, the judicial system, writ large. He's attacking institutions, both not just government institutions, but other institutions that we once held in high esteem as a society, like universities. He's attacking really anything that stands in the way that could be a guardrail and shape, but he's doing it not just by, his normal way of on going on social media and calling people names. He's getting other people to say no. These people are the enemy. They started with us, my profession, the press being the enemy of the people. Like, how has he managed to be so effective in making so many people completely change what it means to believe in the institutions that make America America?
Yeah, I think like many propagandists or uh, people who engage in counterintelligence work, he looks for the fault lines in society and exploits them. So one big fault line in society, of course, is race. And so how can he get people to feel like they are victims and they have grievances? And so race, right? That's the way that is what he will use to destroy these institutions. When it comes to universities, they are all about DEI. They are promoting minorities and women and the woke left and the LGBT community over you. They are not letting you become elite because the elites want these other people to be better than you and they look down on you. Of course, that is false. It is a line of propaganda. But if you say it enough times, people begin to believe it. And so there is this anti-university animus out there that they're all a bunch of leftists and we should defund them and punish them until and unless they agree to our extortionate demands. And same with other institutions that could be critics of Trump, like the media, like the courts, like science, undermining science, because science can be inconvenient. When there is a government shutdown or a shutdown because of the COVID pandemic, that costs the economy and Donald Trump's popularity. So you have to discredit all of those people who are in government. The other thing I'll say about um, media and controlling the media, it's really frightening how quickly Donald Trump has been able to control the media. He kicked out the AP for daring to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico. Um, we saw ABC settle a case where they had a very strong case in a what I thought was a very frivolous defamation lawsuit that Donald Trump filed against him. And then, of course, he replaced many of the traditional media outlets with right-wing media outlets. I mean, how do you control the messaging, control the messenger, have people who are beholden to you, right-wing outlets like ONE and Fox and Breitbart? These organizations are now the ones who are getting the information and filtering it and sharing it with the public. And the other thing that Donald Trump, I think, has learned a disinformation trick regarding messaging from authoritarians is the not only the lack of a need to be consistent. Most of us who have any sort of moral code understand that we need to be consistent in our speech. The easiest way to be consistent, of course, is to tell the truth. But if you're not going to be truthful, at least be consistent, right? I think most people would agree with that strategically. Donald Trump not only doesn't care about being inconsistent, he seeks to be inconsistent because that causes great frustration with people. So, for example, you may recall that he called Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator, the president of Ukraine. And then when he was asked about it by the media, like a week later, he said, I didn't call him a dictator, just completely denies what is absolutely provable fact. And the reason for that kind of contradiction is it causes people to become frustrated, to become cynical, and finally to become numb and to disengage from politics altogether. I
Yeah.
can't stand to read about Donald Trump. He says
Yeah.
one day and another thing the next. He's a crook. I don't want to listen to any of this. They're all a bunch of crooks. Biden was a crook because President Trump told me so. And so now
Right.
that's where the authoritarian really wants you. Disengage from politics altogether.
Yeah. So how do we, and I want to pivot the conversation a little bit to some solutions, and how these tactics can be combated. And let's start with information, where people get it through the media. What's different now than was different in the past, And even what was different during the pandemic, right? Because let's take the Black Lives Matter movement, that really caught fire when we were all in our homes, we were all locked down, and we were all forced together to see someone be tried, convicted, and executed on the street in Minneapolis in a way that was appalling to our senses. We all took in the same information, and for a moment, people could understand there was a commonality there. Now we are so fragmented. Everybody, I mean, I try to read a diverse a diverse array of sources of information every day. And that's hard to do. And that's my job. And it's hard to do. How do we break through and combat disinformation when we're all in our silos looking at these and getting only the information that we really want to see, Ruth?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. And because the media, the structure of media in this country is undergoing such a big change. And many people no longer want to read kind of a lot of the big flagship papers for, they're disgusted with them. And they also don't want to watch, cable news. So you've had this kind of individualization of communications. Think about all the podcasts, think about all the Substacks. And some of them, like the Contrarian, which is new, are collectives, or the Bulwark, but most of them are not. They're like, I'm a one woman. Lucid is a one woman thing, right? And so you can make your own communities, which is what I've tried to do, but that in terms of like a broad societal trust and collective mobilization things, that makes it more difficult. And this is a global thing, though. And in fact, autocrats have responded in some places to this individualization of communication. So example, in Turkey, Erdogan, who's just arrested all the opposition, it's so horrible. He has long done these insult suits. We're talking like this guy who gets a pass, this tyrant, has sued about 150,000 regular people in Turkey if for social media posts, for this, for that. And so they're individualizing their aggression to the creator economy. And so the other thing I want to say is social media is clearly a double-edged sword. And we know, many of us, what the evils of it are. It allows disinformation to just circulate very, very fast. And one of the things that one of the kind of hallmarks of propaganda is that you have to repeat the message over and over again, but you have to have small variations so people don't get bored. And the social media allows everybody to do that because you make a meme out of it. You add, your commentary as you're sharing. And so the message, the lies circulate and they seem new. On the other hand, social media has allowed dissidents and people to reach out and, like, for example, filming the moment of their arrest. That's what Imamoglu just did in Turkey, the mayor of Istanbul. He filmed himself. The police were outside his door, and he filmed himself putting his suit and tie on, speaking calmly, and he was going to be arrested as soon as he opened his door. And in Moscow, anti-Putin people did this in 2019. And so you build these communities of solidarity, transnational communities, by using social media. So it's a double-edged thing.
Yeah. Barb, what do you think? How, understanding disinformation as well as you do, how do you combat it in not just in such a fragmented society, but in one that we're all human beings and we do have confirmation bias? How do we break through?
Yeah, I think there are two components to it. One is making sure we ourselves are informed accurately by practicing good media literacy. And there are a number of things we can do to make sure we're getting accurate information. So making sure you're using credible sources, right? You're not just following somebody with a name like Patriot Girl online who said something was true. We know from Robert Mueller's report back in 2016 that a lot of people pose as people they are not online and say things when in fact they're Russian operatives or political operatives in the United States. So a credible source is really important, whether that is a mainstream newspaper, whether that is PBS, whether that's Ruth's Substack, all of Kim's columns in the Boston Globe, all of those things are very important. Next, not only should it be a credible source, you really need to read more than one source. I think that if you only read one newspaper, or you only listen to one radio station, or you only watch one television channel, I think even if it's a very good one and a very credible one, you are likely getting their viewpoint. And so some networks don't focus on certain stories that might be newsworthy. And so I think it's worthwhile to look at more than one source of news. Here's another one, and Kim, I suffer from the same thing. I subscribe to like all these newsletters, which I love. All these newspapers send me the morning report, the evening report, and it's so much, but I do try to read it because I don't want to miss anything. But sometimes I just skim the headlines. And that is
Yeah.
incredibly dangerous because in this day and age, a lot of newspapers use kind of these clickbait headlines.
Mhm.
And so you can't really just rely on a headline and think that you know what that story is about, because they often bear very little resemblance to the actual story. I will tell you a quick example that I saw not that long ago. There was a story in the Athletic, which is the New York Times's sports section, and it said, "Inside the Caitlin Clark media meltdown." And you may know that Caitlin Clark is this women's basketball player. She plays in the WNBA. She was a great college player, and she's been under a lot of pressure as the new rookie in the WNBA. And I thought to myself, oh no, Caitlin Clark had a media meltdown. Oh, poor thing. The stress must have finally gotten to her. Now, if I just moved on, I'd still have that impression. But I actually clicked on it and read the story. And if you thought that that headline meant that Caitlin Clark had some sort of tantrum during a press conference or something, you are to be forgiven, but you would be wrong, because she
Right.
did no such thing. She was actually quite poised, and it was a member of the media who unleashed some tirade against her, profanity
Right.
tirade. She didn't have any meltdown at all. The reporter did. So
Right.
inside the Caitlin Clark media meltdown was not about Caitlin Clark at all. So
And yeah, that happens. I mean, that happened just this last week. I saw a headline that was, uh, a U.S. attorney who recently left when Trump was inaugurated, found dead in her apartment. It made it totally seem like it was
Yeah.
something awful, and it was not.
yes,
It
Mhm.
appears to have been no connection to her previous employment at all. But for a moment, it was like, oh my God, now,
yeah,
people are, it's so dangerous. And
yeah,
that's such a
like
good
made you
point.
click. Yeah, made you click.
Exactly.
But so consuming good information is important, but then I
Yes.
think we have a responsibility to share that with others. And they say one of the most effective means of communication is talking to someone who trusts you, your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, your
Yeah.
mothers, your fathers, your children, your
Yeah.
siblings, all of them. If you can talk to them like, hey, what do you think about what Trump is doing with immigration? And they might say,
Mhm.
I think it's great because we've ignored that problem for too long. And then maybe share with them, well, I agree maybe on the substance of that, but don't you think he needs to follow the law to do that? And maybe have
Yeah.
that conversation in that way. I think that could be the most effective way we can get people to understand what's going on in our country.
All right, we have a lot of questions coming in from our audience members. I want to get to some of those. One is, can you talk about the lessons from Poland and other countries that have pivoted away from
Mhm.
authoritarianism? Ruth, what do you say to
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, Poland is a great, they did everything right, basically. Now, they have a multi-party system, and we are in a different situation. It's, the bipartisan thing was always supposed to be good, good, and America's so stable, all these other countries, the governments keep falling. Well, it turns out if you have an autocratic assault, it's better to have a multi-party system because you can have a kind of opposition coalition. And in Poland, they had 6 parties that came together, that it becomes a big tent. Whereas we have one giant party. And really, one of the stories, I think, is that this party is not, because it's only one and it's so big, it is not. It is not equipped to handle crisis. It's not flexible. Whereas in multi-party systems, there are people who migrate among parties, and you're able to band together against the aggressor. So Poland, they did that. they also exposed corruption and corruption to do with immigrants, because the far right government was talking the usual thing, immigrant invasion, we don't want the wrong colored skin babies, the usual stuff.
Yeah.
And so the civic coalition, the opposition coalition, exposed that they'd been like, you know, doing visa buying stuff and just corruption stuff. They also had an optimistic message, and this is very important. Literally the slogan was a heart, and it was the March of a Million Hearts. And Donald Tusk, who was the head of the coalition, was then elected. He talked about, you know, having a future together, and that this cannot be stopped. We're all here. And it was the biggest rally since the fall of communism, and it translated into the biggest turnout since the fall of communism for voting. So they managed to mobilize people. And the last component was, we know that if you just talk about democracy, it's too abstract to people. So
Yeah.
it was also about preserving reproductive rights, which were vanishing, had a very, like, abortion was practically illegal. And so there were stories where, you know, women came out, like grandmothers were there, and they said, this is for my granddaughter. I don't want her to lose rights. So they had a combination of optimistic, large messaging, forward-looking, hopeful messaging, kindness and empathy, and that was the heart symbol. A big tent with 6 parties, so you had a large spectrum of opinion, and concrete agenda things that they were going to do, like restore reproductive rights. And all of this came together to have success. And so that's a good, I'm always looking around the world to see what is working and what can we adapt for our country.
Another good question asked you to talk about anticipatory obedience that we've seen on the part of the wealthy, on the part of certain institutions, on the part of some news organizations, as you pointed out, Barb. Talk about a little bit about that.
It's been actually incredibly disappointing, I think, to see what has happened from the private sector, from some media outlets, from law firms. I saw someone in the chat mention the Paul Weiss law firm. That's a really outstanding law firm. Historically, that law firm has been one with a lot of social justice interests, even though it is a Wall Street law firm. They were founded by Jewish lawyers who were rejected from the white shoe law firms of New York back in the day. And they've always prided themselves on taking on unpopular causes. And so I found it particularly disappointing that they agreed to pay $40 million to get out of Trump's executive order. I mean, that's just extortion. I shouldn't say $40 million, $40 million in free pro bono services
Sure.
to Trump's
Yeah.
favorite causes. It's really shocking. And it's amazing, you know, anticipatory obedience too. You see universities kind of cowering and not saying anything because they don't want to be next. They don't want to be Columbia and get defunded. And I think one of the things that's difficult for, you know, it's easy for us to say from where we sit, they should be doing something. I think they're thinking about their constituencies. They're thinking about their students. They're thinking about the research funding that they need and that they do. But I think that when they act alone like that, they are far less powerful than if they were acting together. I would love to see all of these universities come together and say,
Yeah.
do you realize that we are curing diseases? We are doing research that you know, protects the environment, that protects our health, all kinds of important things. And defunding us is going to make it more difficult for all of us. Or, you know, for law firms to say, you know, Jenner Block yesterday got attacked for once employing Andrew Weissman many years ago, who was a member of the FBI team that was involved in the Hillary Clinton, you know, Russia investigation. Are you kidding me? And
Yeah.
they, you know, they have been targeted. The law firm should be banding together and saying,
Yes.
you are attacking our profession without any basis whatsoever. This is wrong. And I think if all of these different sectors would do that, they would be incredibly powerful because I think their collective action would insulate any one of them from retaliation.
Yeah. You want to say something to that, Ruth?
Yeah. It's um it's just horrible, because we know that works, that it's
Yes.
that when you band together and you have solidarity and you present a united front, the bullies often cave. And so it's really a tragedy that this is not happening, that in fact the opposite is happening. I wrote a piece for Lucid on moral collapse, which is going on with all of this obeying first in advance, and then obeying, just caving to these extortionist tactics. And so every time, and so Paul Weiss and Columbia, they were thinking only of themselves, and setting a terrible example and making it easier for the bully to bully others.
I think that's
And
absolutely true. Yes. I
it's
mean,
really tragic. Yeah.
yeah, as a Columbia alumnus, I'm very disappointed to have seen that happen, as well as some news organizations. I believe, there's a reason why the White House is attacking the entire White House press uh, corps writ large, is because they know that some are already fallen, and that it
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
it works, and so that makes the attacks on all of us greater. And I don't understand what people don't understand about that. I want to get to some more questions. There are some questions about, and I'll start with you, Ruth. Why, I'm combining a couple. Why do Christian nationalism and racism seem to be central parts of this gambit?
So one of the patterns I discovered in researching my book was, and I was asking myself the question, when do these demagogues appeal? These racist, sexist demagogues, anti-democratic, when do they appeal? And over, it's been when societies have had a lot of social progress, which has led many, many people to be empowered, but others feeling left out. And you can even go back to Spain in the 1930s, where often it's often gender and race as well as workers' rights. In Spain in the 1930s, when women got legal emancipation, they could inherit, they had all kinds of new economic power. And so that upset enough people, and it created, conditions where people thought, oh, let's do a coup. And this was Franco. But around the world, this has happened. So where were we in 2016? We had 8 years of an African-American president. Many people never accepted. We had legalization of same-sex marriage. We had women admitted to combat, including in the special forces. On and on. You had this kind of milestones where we were going to be realizing the promise of multi-faith, multiracial democracy with real gains for groups. And so up comes Trump, and he's going to just turn the whole thing back. And so he's openly racist from the beginning, appealing to neo-Nazis and every kind of racist. And, this is what's happened. It's Jim Crow, 2.0. It's also taking from Nazis, from South Africa now, every strain of world racism, as well as inherited practice from our own institutionalized racist system is coming to fruition now. And the same with the gender stuff, where the hypermasculinity, the homophobia, and the misogyny, which is the triad of authoritarian gender politics, it's all represented. And what you do is the leader himself has to be kind of this brutal masculinity who's gotten away with it, right? And then you put people in government, i.e. Hegseth and others, who are also like that, who have histories of being racist, of being, assaulters. And so you not only normalize those values, you actually reward them and set them up as positive, and that's terrifying.
Yeah, and you insulate them from consequence. I mean, just
That's
the
Yeah.
the signal gate, the fact that it was just circle and protect, and not someone immediately resigning, as would happen in the past, only serves to reinforce that. And one thing that that think about a lot was in the years leading up to Donald Trump's current term, I did see, even long before his first term to some extent, as there was progress being made in certain areas, people of my generation, Gen X, parents who cared very much and wanted the best for their kids' future, would say to their white, sons sometimes, well, you know that it's going to be harder for you because you are not going to get, people are trying to diversify and they're trying to hire more women and more people of color. So it's going to be harder for you and me living in my America with my eyes from my vantage point saying, what are you talking about? Like, I have never been in a space where the demographics of the nation were represented in the space, not in law, not in media, not in boardrooms, not in when I took a deposition, like never. So this is patently not true, but people believe that. And I believe that's how Trump was able to expand to get more votes, was some people that were saying, yeah, change is good, but this is just too much. And they were able to frame, they may be appalled at George Floyd being murdered in the street, or even at people just being whisked away on airplanes with no process. But they also think that, that it's too much with the pronouns. And I'm amazed at how effective that was. It's quite amazing. Go ahead. Did you want to jump in, Ruth, or I could go
No,
to
no,
the
I was
next?
just agreeing. I was just agreeing.
Okay,
Yes.
so I want to get back to the legal profession a little bit, Barb. How can people push back? I mean, we've seen sort of the Chief Justice of the United States sort of step in and make a pretty bland statement, but unusual for him, I guess strongly worded for the Chief Justice. You're definitely hearing from judges themselves saying, look, we're being attacked and this is not okay. We are trying to do our job here, and that is not good. What can lawyers, judges, people within the legal profession do, Barb, to hold the guardrails of democracy in place?
Yeah, we've seen some of it that's been very positive. The American Bar Association has issued some very strong statements when there was a push to impeach some judges, when there were the issue in the Southern District of New York when they wanted to dismiss the indictment against Eric Adams based on what appeared to be just going along with Trump's agenda. So I think those are some positive starts. But again, I think it comes from collective action. If you
Mm,
leave people alone to speak out, I think they feel vulnerable. And I think that's probably correct, right? Because Trump is so much about retribution. One of the things he wrote in The Art of the Deal, I don't know how much of it he wrote himself and how much of it was ghostwritten by his co-author. But one of the things he said is whenever anybody crosses you, you have to counterpunch by a factor of 10, because you got to send them a message that you never get away with crossing Trump, and you want to send a message to everybody else out there to deter them so that they don't think about crossing Trump. But if everybody gets together as a profession, then I think it's much harder for him to fight back and counterpunch against an entire profession. So it really should be an absolute no-brainer for bar associations of every state. I'm really proud that my state, Michigan State Bar of Michigan, did issue a statement in defense of the rule of law. I
mm,
think when state bars say things like that, the rule of law is really essential in our democracy. It says that all of us are bound by the law. People don't get to just take stuff or hurt people or do things out of turn without being accountable under the law. So I
mm.
would love to see state bars band together. I'd love to see other bar associations band together. If we can't defend judges from impeachment and threats, then what can we agree on? So I know that there are firms out there who are cowering right now. There was a lot of talk about putting together an amicus brief, friend of the court brief, on behalf of Perkins Coie, the one of these law firms that was targeted that actually did file a lawsuit and already received a temporary restraining order from the execution of this executive order, finding that it was likely in violation of the First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment. Proud of the law firm that represented them, Williams and Connolly, but they've had a difficult time getting other law firms to sign on to say, we agree that this is wrong. I think law firm, and maybe the addition of Jenner and Block yesterday will finally make law firms realizing he's coming after one a week. It's been
Right.
4 weeks, and every week there's been a new one. And they're all for the most ridiculous, petty things, like you employed a lawyer who once filed a lawsuit against me or something like that. They're coming for all of you eventually. And so
Right.
band together now while you still have the opportunity.
Yeah, capitulation does not save
Mhm.
you in this situation. I say that as a resident of DC who was watching as the Black Lives Matter Plaza was being
Oh,
destroyed, but
Awful.
the city still got uh, you know, ripped off by $1 billion of its budget. So like why did city
yeah.
officials concede to that demand? Don't concede. Ruth, a really good question here. The media and authoritarianism reinforce each other. What can we do as citizens to fight back?
Um, in terms of a media that's captured on behalf of the government, I guess.
Well, I think there is a listen, as a journalist, I am sometimes critical of the general criticism of the media, but I think I understand what people are saying, that the media does not speak about what is happening in the framework that our
Mhm.
institutions are being attacked for the purpose of bringing in authoritarianism. I don't think they're
Hmm.
doing that. They're thinking about the latest headline, they're thinking
Yeah.
about getting clicks, they're thinking about these other things. So people are saying, how do we? I think a lot of times people do feel helpless and they don't believe that what they're doing matters. They're told to vote,
Yeah.
but now they're eroding election systems and people don't have faith in that. They're told to call your lawmakers, but people don't have faith in that, particularly if they live in very red or very blue places. So what are some tools that people can use um, to fight back? I mean, I on my podcast, Justice by Design, I talked a little bit about how all politics really is local. And if you let everybody
Yes.
know your values, right down from your city
Yeah.
councilors to your school board members, your state officials, all the way up to your members of Congress, that does make a difference. Can you talk a little bit about individual action to fight
Yeah.
authoritarianism?
Yeah, it's important, community, but also not not getting cynical,
Mm,
because what authoritarians always want is to make you feel helpless and hopeless. They want you to feel that they're like a big bulldozer, that it's inevitable, they're omnipotent, they're all powerful, they're everywhere. And that's what their personality cults are for. And that there's nothing you can do to stop this. And right now, it's particularly, it's easy to be intimidated because, oh, hello, we have the richest man in the whole world who has been invited, who had, poor little rich kid, he had everything. He had his own social media platform, he had all the money, but he didn't have a way to infiltrate a sovereign state and take power. Well, greedy old Trump gave him that and gave him, and so Doge was created, in my view, as a way for him to infiltrate. So that's all very, that can be
yeah.
extremely daunting, but I do believe that we're going to save ourselves from the bottom up. So community communication and community action is absolutely key. I also am a big fan of, and this may seem like too small scale, but if we all do it, everybody knows someone or I have various family members who are politely put, dwelling in the disinformation tunnel. You can't, they're like, again, it's not like brainwashed or gaslighted, whatever term you'd like to use. And maybe we've stopped talking to these people. And I went through this with my mother, who got all radicalized from watching Russia Today during the lockdown. She's in England. So she would have like rants against immigrants, which this was new for her. And so I would hang up on her. And then I was like, why are you hanging up? That you know better than that. You're supposed to have the dialogue. So it's very difficult. But I believe, and this goes back to my point, there's going to be a reckoning. It's going to be obvious to people that disease is being spread, the economy's going to be tanking, prices are going to go up. They won't be receiving their checks. It's chaos. This is not what they voted for. So Democrats, even if the Democratic Party is hopefully they'll get their act together, but we need to have our own kind of action, going to people and starting to talk to them. And Barb was saying this a little bit before.
Yeah.
Presenting them with facts. And it's difficult because if they're really brainwashed, like my own mother, I was sending her stuff that I'd written for CNN, and she's like, that's fake news. I'm like, Mom, I wrote it. So it is challenging, but I know, it's terrible. But and I still can't get my my half sister to be vaccinated, even though she's around my 97-year-old father. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
difficult. But I believe that those individual things, we have to do them. And then community action is absolutely key. Getting involved with civically, running for office, or just getting involved, volunteering, because it's like when our democracy is declining, and to a degree what's happening now, we have to take care of our and act with care toward our democracy. The same way we take our vitamins, we go to the gym, we have to do something every day on
Yes.
behalf of our democracy, on behalf of the truth, on behalf of the values that we can embody in ourselves, the values of democracy, solidarity,
Yeah.
empathy, justice.
And
Even
that
if,
keeps us clear. That keeps us
yes,
clear in our own view of the world
that's it.
while we move forward. And I have to say, I always say I can get on TV and talk till I'm blue in the face, and I will be less effective than people who talk to their own family members about
Yeah.
why they believe and why they believe what they believe, and that can make a difference. I've seen that happen. I'm gonna hit one question quickly because we're almost out of time. Because I get it a lot. Is there a world where the American people can file a class action lawsuit against the Trump administration?
Mm.
Barb, you can come in and tell me if I'm wrong. I understand the sentiment of that question. The answer is likely no. I mean, to get a class action, it has to be so many things. You have to have similarly situated people with a tangible injury. You have to get standing. You have to find the right venue. Like, no, the answer is long and short is no. The things that we're talking about here is and I mean that all in legal. I know everyone is injured by what's going on, but I mean that these are very specific standards from a legal standpoint. It would not work. What we're talking about now is where it's at, is actually the collective action, the community action, signing up with local groups, doing what you can to back up against democracy. I hate to do this to you, but in 30 seconds, what is giving you hope right now? Each of you. Barb, you first. What's giving
Well,
you hope?
what's giving me hope actually is that Trump does back down when he
Hmm.
faces criticism. You think about some of the things that we've seen. Remember when he was getting a lot of pushback about Elon Musk isn't really the head of the Doge? He had that cabinet meeting. He said, "You're in charge, not Elon Musk." Taking down all of the accomplishments of minority and women in the military, including Jackie Robinson, and people were horrified, and they put that back up.
Yeah.
Tariffs. He wants to do tariffs, but there's so much pushback that he's been backing down. So I
Hmm.
think when there is resistance, he does back down. And so that
Yes.
tells me that we do have the power to shape the agenda.
Yeah, I think that's right. Ruth, what's giving you hope?
That I have a mantra: never underestimate the American people. Um, and and also, yeah, we need to feel our power. This is the time to exercise our power as citizens, as activists, as whether it's lawyers or whatever our special skills are. This is the time to band together and exercise those skills on behalf of our beloved democracy.
This has been a fantastic discussion. My thanks for allowing me to be a part of it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa.
I I can't thank the three of you enough. Frightening conversation, spot on conversation, also inspiring. And the message that we'll be the ones to save ourselves from the bottom up, that's really important as we sit here in Big Tent, right? So thank you so much. Also, I don't know about you, but I think we need a march of a million hearts. I don't know
Yeah.
if we're there yet, but that's what we need, right? Anyway, thank you all three of you for coming and joining us in the Big Tent, and for being a part of this. We hope to have you back soon, and thank everyone for being here this evening. Thank you all so much.